30 men against 4,000 is staring at the problem. If they don't solve this in 60 minutes, the entire American defensive line would collapse, Seoul would fall, and the Korean War might be lost before it even truly began, a pair of mud-caked boots. The ground is a churned-up mess of red earth and deeper, darker stains. Rain lashes down, turning everything to slick, dangerous grease. Heavy, desperate breathing. Distant, muffled machine gun fire. The metallic thunk of a shell impacting nearby earth. A young soldier's face, smudged with dirt and exhaustion. His eyes dart wide with terror and resolve. He's trying to unjam a Browning automatic rifle. His fingers are fumbling, numb with cold and fear. The frantic clank of the weapon jamming. A line of weary, mud-soaked American soldiers, barely a dozen, huddled behind a shallow berm. More gunfire erupts closer. They are exposed. They are running out of time. It was July 5, 1950. South Korea. The first American troops have arrived on the ground. Captain Charles Smith stared at the rapidly advancing waves of North Korean tanks and infantry. His rifle was jammed. His men were outnumbered 40-1. A vast, undulating landscape. Tiny dots, tanks, and trucks are swarming across it like ants. The low rumble of distant armor. A map overlaid with crude, rapidly drawn arrows pointing south. A single red circle marks the thin defensive line. Quick cuts. A newspaper headline screaming, "North Korea invades." Frightened refugees fleeing a burning village. A focused general studying a big map, jaw tight. This was it. The decisive moment. Weeks earlier, the world had watched in disbelief as North Korean forces, armed with Soviet tanks in overwhelming numbers, poured across the 38th parallel. South Korea, unprepared, was crumbling. The UN called for intervention. America responded. But they had underestimated the enemy. Badly. What followed was a gamble. A desperate, almost suicidal move. Send in anyone immediately. Just a show of force. Something to slow the torrent. A speed bump against a tidal wave. They called it Task Force Smith, a hastily assembled collection of green troops, fresh from occupation duty in Japan. Outdated weapons. No heavy anti-tank guns. Many had never seen combat. Their mission? Hold the line north of Osan, just long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Desaturated, slightly dreamlike visuals. Soldiers relaxing in Japan, playing cards, laughing, sunlight, a stark contrast to the mud, a frantic telephone ringing in a military office. Captain Smith, looking younger, listening intently on a radio, concern etching his face. Soldiers scrambling onto cargo planes, their faces grim, unsure. The planes look rickety. A young soldier's hand clutching a letter from home. A truck full of troops bumping down a dusty Korean road. The men are trying to look brave, but fear is visible in their eyes. Weeks before the mud and blood, these men were garrison soldiers in Japan. Their biggest threat was boredom. They were part of the 24th Infantry Division, a unit designed for post-war occupation, not frontline combat. On June 25, 1950, that changed. The news hit like a lightning bolt. North Korea invaded and panic hit Washington. MacArthur had to act. Immediately. He needed any American presence to buy time. So he cobbled together Task Force Smith, 2 rifle companies, a communications platoon, and a handful of artillerymen, 406 men, mostly teenagers. Armed with old bazookas, a few recoilless rifles, and M1 Garans. Their only heavy support was 6 obsolete 105mm howitzers. Their orders: deploy north, establish a defensive position, and stop the North Korean advance. They were told to expect an easy fight, a mere police action. They were tragically, horrifyingly wrong. A soldier frantically loading a 2.36-inch bazooka. The warhead looked small, almost toy-like. The clunk of the bazooka being loaded. The crackle of small arms fire. A bazooka round impacts the armor and simply bounces off or leaves a minor scorch mark. The North Korean spearhead was the T-3485 tank, a marvel of Soviet engineering, sloped armor, a powerful 85mm gun, nearly impervious to anything Task Force Smith possessed. Their bazookas were designed for World War II-era tanks, not this Steel Behemoth. They were glorified firecrackers against a rolling fortress. Even their new 75mm recoilless rifles, touted as tank killers, would prove largely ineffective against the T-34's front armor. An artilleryman sighting down a 105mm howitzer. His face is grim. It's designed for area suppression, not punching through tank armor. The only chance was the 105mm howitzers, and even those needed a direct hit on the engine deck or tracks. But the howitzers were placed too far back, intended for indirect fire. They would have to be brought forward, exposed, to engage the tanks directly, a suicidal maneuver. Captain Smith scanning the horizon with binoculars. He sees the sheer number of enemy soldiers. And then there was the sheer weight of numbers. Estimates placed the North Korean division at over 4,000 men, supported by dozens of tanks. Task Force Smith had 406. Many of them sick from the sea voyage. They were not just outgunned. They were utterly overwhelmed. Return to the opening scene. Rain, mud, chaos. The roar of an approaching T-34. A soldier screams. Machine guns fire relentlessly. Captain Smith, his face set. He finally clears the rifle's jam. The click is loud, almost painful. The satisfying clack of the weapon loading. Handheld shot. Smith firing in short, controlled bursts, covering his men. Soldiers throwing grenades, knowing it's futile against the tanks, but trying to stem the infantry. The howitzers, now brought forward, firing directly at an approaching tank. The recoil shakes the ground. A T-34 takes a direct hit to its tracks. It slews sideways, a plume of smoke erupting. A soldier, wounded, being dragged back by another. His face is contorted in pain. A North Korean infantryman, bayonet fixed, charging through the mud. A desperate hand-to-hand struggle ensues. The American line slowly, painfully, giving ground. They are retreating, but they are fighting. Every step is agony. Every bullet fired is a silent prayer. The battle raged for hours. The green troops, initially stunned, found their courage. They fired everything they had. Bazooka rounds bounced off the T-34s like pebbles. Men fell, but they kept fighting. Captain Smith, leading from the front, emptied clips, shouted orders, and rallied his dwindling force. The impossible solution? Not a single brilliant tactic, but sheer, unyielding tenacity. They couldn't stop the tanks, but they could delay the infantry. They aimed for the T-34's tracks. They fired at the exposed tank commanders. And when the North Korean infantry swarmed, they met them with every last bullet, every bayonet, every desperate fist. They bought time with their blood. The same ridge, now littered with debris, shattered equipment, and bodies. The rain has stopped. The sun shines through, creating long, sharp shadows. Eerie silence, punctuated by distant birdsong or the drip of water. A lone, discarded helmet, half buried in the mud. Wounded American soldiers, covered in bandages, being loaded onto trucks. Their faces are vacant. Captain Smith, looking older, wearier, standing beside a general. There's a look of profound sorrow in his eyes. A grave marker, simple and stark, in a Korean field. A modern map of South Korea, showing the resilient, prosperous nation it is today. The Battle of Osan was a brutal, bloody defeat. Task Force Smith was overrun. Of the 406 men, 180 were killed, wounded, or captured. Almost half. They didn't stop the North Korean advance. They couldn't, but they did buy time. Enough time for reinforcements, more seasoned troops, and effective anti-tank weapons to arrive. Enough time to establish a new defensive perimeter further south. Enough time for the world to react. The sacrifice of Task Force Smith, often forgotten in the grand narrative of the Korean War, was the ultimate speed bump. A line drawn in the mud and bled by young, unprepared men who faced an impossible foe. Their stand, though a tactical loss, was a strategic victory. It signaled to the world that America would fight. It gave South Korea a chance, and it proved that even against overwhelming odds, the human spirit, pushed to its absolute limit, can hold a line against the tide. Their valor, paid for in blood on that rainy Korean ridge, laid the foundation for the freedom of a nation